What's going on, Notre Dame fans? Mike Singer, Tyler Horka, Jack Soble, live on the Blue and Gold YouTube channel for this week's Notre Dame six-pack show, where we take 6 Fighting Irish topics and take 6 minutes to discuss each of them. And folks, will remind you before we dive into today's show to please hit the thumbs up on this video. Subscribe to the YouTube channel here at Blue and Gold. If you are new, I trust that you boys are well, so just go ahead and dive into the first topic. 3 Notre Dame players cracked the On3 top 100. It's like impact players. I think it's not algorithms, like some kind of formula that they put into it. It's not like just a one man subjective opinion. I want to say it's there's some kind of impact formula. If maybe you guys know and can correct me, but 3 Notre Dame players made that list. So Jack, I'll throw it over to you to tell the people who made it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's a formula. My impression is the impact qualifier just means they consider positional value, which makes sense. They're measuring the impact on the game, not necessarily how good a player is. But the players on the list: Leonard Moore at number 7, Jeremiah Love at number 11, and the Love is the number 1 running back, Moore is the number 1 cornerback, and all the way down, Emil Wagner at number 95. My initial impression is there are certainly a few players I could see on this list aside from these 3. I don't know if I have serious gripes with anyone who was excluded, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts, Tyler.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it in clarifying that Leonard Moore is the top cornerback, Jeremiah Love top running back. So, like, if you've got 2 of those guys in the top 11, I guess it is, players in college football, then you're doing something right. Now, I'm looking at the top 11 that you had at the bottom of your article, and you see Ohio State wide receiver Jeremiah Smith and some of these edge rushers. And if you're a Notre Dame fan, you're thinking, man, if we had a wide receiver like that, or if we had a defensive end like that, then that's probably what this team is missing. But I look at it the other way, and you're like, man, we have probably the best corner in college football. We probably have the best running back in college football. And I think that's a big reason why Notre Dame is at where it's at, in spite of not having the big time defensive end. I mean, Riley Mills led this team in sacks with like 6.5, 7.5 last year. He didn't even play the final 3 games of the season. So, like, you're missing, I don't even want to say an Isaiah Foskey type, because I feel like he was even a merchant in some of those games against like lesser competition where he racked up some of his sacks. You are missing like an Abdul Carter type. Let's say that. Because like if Abdul Carter was still in college football, he'd be in this top 11 that I'm staring at right now. So for Notre Dame and where it's at, I think you're in a fine spot just having 2 of the top 11 and both of those guys being the best at their position. The big drop-off is what you also alluded to, Jack. I think that's where you're like, okay, can Notre Dame be as good as it was last year if its 3rd highest impact player is Emil Wagner and he's an offensive tackle? And we know what we say about offensive linemen. Like, if you're not hearing from them, it's probably a good thing. And you're hearing from him because he's on this list. In terms of like penalties and stuff, you don't want, like, I saw your face there. It's like, if we weren't talking about Emil Wagner a whole lot last year, I thought that was a good thing. And actually, I'll give you guys a little teaser. And if you've bought the Blue and Gold preview magazine that we do for each and every season, 160 pages, glossy cover. It's beautiful. It's fantastic. I did a segment looking back at the 2024 season, ranking the top 5 players of that season. I threw Emil Wagner in there because I thought he was Notre Dame's best offensive lineman, played in every single game. He's the only offensive lineman that could say that. We still weren't saying like a whole lot about him because he was just so steady. So it's a good thing that he's on this list for those reasons. But then, like, wouldn't you want a wide receiver or something, Jack? Like maybe a big time linebacker that's going to get you 100 tackles and like 15 tackles for loss or something, like an impact player like that. I think you would like that in between Jeremiah Love and Emil Wagner. But Wagner being on this list isn't a bad thing either, because I think, like I said, he was so solid last year.
For sure. I would like to see Wagner take a step up. You mentioned Abdul Carter. That was someone Wagner struggled against. Here's a hot take for you. You mentioned Notre Dame not necessarily having that premier edge rusher. I think if Boubacar Traore did not get hurt, we would be talking about him in that top 25 on this impact player list. I think he was on his way to becoming that good last year. And I'm not necessarily saying like I think we're gonna talk about him as a top 20 player at this time next year, because he obviously we need to see how he comes back from the injury. That's always a question mark, but I think he can. He and Boubacar Traore excuse me. He and Charles Jagasaw are two guys who I think if they didn't get hurt, they would be on this list. There are a few guys like Wagner was the guy who made it. Like Drake Bowen has been getting some national buzz in other circles. He could have easily made this list. I think Jane Greathouse and Malachi Fields could have had a case for the back end. Adon Schuler, who I'll talk about later in the players who need more buzz section. I think he has a case for the back end. So like again, there are a few guys who I think could have a case for being on this list, but weren't, and that's fine. It's like there are no obvious snubs, but there are some I could have seen being on there, in my opinion. But you're right that Notre Dame has been missing a premier wide receiver for a while, and we've talked about it on the show. That's a position they need to get better at, and I fully agree that while Isaiah Foskey's sack numbers were up there, they also haven't had that guy at edge rusher for a while. The reason I kind of made a face when you mentioned Notre Dame's third player is an offensive lineman, that's not necessarily a good thing. Like, you feel the impact of great offensive linemen, man. Like that's something that all the national championship teams, like their offensive lines kick ass. And Emil Wagner is the rock of that group right now. And I think that's pretty clear to see with some incredibly high upside on the interior, but Wagner really raises the floor there.
It's interesting.
I think I was more so. Yeah, go ahead.
Mike. No, you go ahead. Your show.
It's just like for Joe Alt, for example, if he was on this list, he'd be in the top 5. But your best Notre Dame offensive lineman is Emil Wagner at what number was he at again? Honest question.
95. I get why that's the case right now. I don't think we'll be talking about a Notre Dame the best Notre Dame offensive lineman being number 95 in the country by the end of the season.
And you're saying that's Jagasaw, right?
I think it could be Jagasaw, Wagner, or Shroud. All those guys can be all. I think so. You mentioned the football preview just crafted the top 5 draft prospects. I put Jagasaw and Shroud on there, while acknowledging that Wagner was clearly the best college offensive lineman Notre Dame had last year. That's how good I think this group could be.
Jack, can you tell us what's going on with this USC Notre Dame series? Because I feel like there's been rumors about it, the end of it for a while, but this report from I believe it was Pat Forty that came out this week seems like it's a little bit more concretely going away, but everyone's fighting for it, but it still might go away. What's going on?
Yep, excellent reporting by Pat Forty there, MIZ. Yeah, USC Notre Dame is probably dead, it seems like, and the killer appears to be USC. Notre Dame has said in the 40 report, Pete Bavacqua said Notre Dame would like to continue the rivalry, and I wrote up blueandgold.com that it is very much in Notre Dame's interest to continue the rivalry. It is very much in college football's interest, as Bavacqua correctly pointed out. Historic rivalries are what make this sport great, but I think USC has an obligation to act in USC's interest, and it's probably not in USC's interest to play this rivalry. Now, the reason for that is because USC blew up its regional conference through greed and the desire for just more money for themselves. That's why they joined the Big Ten, and that's always been wrong. Pat Forty also wrote in his column earlier today that there are two types of change in college football. There's the necessary change like NIL and the transfer portal, and there's the unnecessary change like conference realignment, because that stems from greed. That's why USC is in a position where playing Notre Dame doesn't benefit them. But the fact of the matter is that they are in that position, and that's in the past, and their job in the present is to make decisions that benefit USC. And for a couple of reasons, playing Notre Dame probably doesn't benefit USC right now.
It just feels like one of those things, Jack, as Tyler, he had a little technical issue. He'll be back in a moment, but it just feels like one of those things, man. Like, college football needs Notre Dame, USC. Like, you can disagree about a lot of things in this sport, but this is one of those things that we need. Tyler, you good?
Yeah, you guys might get a little echo now because this AirPod is.
You're good. Thoughts on some USC Notre Dame stuff?
Yeah, I heard nothing of what Jack said, so if I say all the same things, it's probably a good thing because we're probably on the same page. If this is a casualty of what has become of college football, then I think that's a bad thing. Like, Notre Dame and USC, I just heard what you said, Mike. They should be playing every year because they have played pretty much every single year. What it took for them not to play was the Second World War and a global pandemic unlike any we've ever experienced in our lifetimes, Jack. And I mean, our parents are probably kind of saying the same thing. I mean, it's been a long time since anything like that happened in 2020, right? And that's what it took for Notre Dame not to play USC. So what is it taking now? Money, winning, like trying to get to the college football playoff is what it sounds like on USC's side, where I mean, shoot, man, I see their gripe or their argument, whatever you want to call it. They're in a conference where they've got to travel halfway across the country, pretty much all the way across the country for some of these games. They're in a conference where they're playing really tough teams like Oregon, which was always the case for them, but now it's Michigan and Ohio State. And, you know, when Michigan State is good, or Iowa can come up and like sneak up and beat any one of these teams in their best years like we've seen. So why would you want to add Notre Dame to that? I understand it from USC's perspective on that, but come on, man. Like for 95 years, it's always been a staple of college football. And if this is what crashes it, just like the current climate, the chaotic nature of what college athletics is now, that's a shame. And I didn't get to read Pat Forty's column today, but obviously he's the one that kind of broke this news and kind of kickstarted this conversation. And Jack, if you have read it, I'm assuming you have, it's probably like, come on, man, like figure it out, play this game. Don't be petty, get on the field and give the people what they want. Cause I think that's what it should be.
Yeah, I think obviously I read the column, and like the root cause of this is USC blowing up its regional conference. And that has always been a shame. That has always been a mistake, but that happened. It's in the past, and now USC, instead of being the first or second biggest fish in their pond, is the fourth and fifth biggest fish in their pond, and they have to play two or three of the bigger fish every year, and it just doesn't make sense from their perspective to play Notre Dame right now, and that is an absolute shame. It is, of course, not alone. We've seen great rivalries like Bedlam go away. That's the one example I can think of off the top of my head. I'm sure there are others. We've seen some great rivalries stay throughout conference realignment, like the Civil War, Oregon State. But obviously there are some that have gone away, and it seems like Notre Dame USC is the next casualty.
Yeah, and then another casualty, Texas and Texas A&M. And like you think that those are two teams that should, obviously they're playing now, they should play every single year, but for a solid 13, 14 years, they did not play. And it was because Texas A&M left the Big 12. And like that was a money thing, right? Or that money, notoriety, all the reasons, you know, not wanting to be in the same conference as Texas anymore, whatever it was, they left. Those two teams didn't play. So like if you think, oh, this will get worked out, Notre Dame and USC will be fine, it's possible. No, like there could be a bigger gap than ever with these two teams not playing.
I'll give you another rivalry. Missouri and Kansas have not played since 2011. How about that?
Correct.
So let's talk about the future of Notre Dame rivalries. I love this topic. You really want that like good hate, or maybe not hate. You prefer hate, but really good. Like you're playing each other a ton. You have history. It seems like Notre Dame and Clemson might be that. Tyler, what are your thoughts about if the USC Notre Dame goes away, just like the status of Notre Dame rivalries? Subjective thing, but I'm curious for your take, Ty.
Yeah, Notre Dame, as always, is in a very unique spot where you might not get that. Like Clemson might be that might become your annual rivalry as it pertains to, like we talked about last week on this very show, striking up some animosity that carries over the course of 365 days. Now, May 20th of 2033, when, you know, they're in the middle of this 12-year thing, you're probably not thinking of Clemson. Like you reserve that for Notre Dame and USC, because like there have been many days this offseason where Notre Dame fans have thought of USC and vice versa. That's fun. That's a rivalry. You might not get that, but you will get the carryover of like, hey, they just beat us half a year ago. I can't wait to see them in half a year and try to get them back. So that might be what fulfills your need there in terms of rivalries. But like, again, I'll go back to Notre Dame being in a unique spot. If the schedules hold, who knows? Jack always makes a good point. Like, Notre Dame is supposed to play Texas in a few years and Alabama in a few years. Who knows if that happens? Because like, if you're an SEC school and the college football playoff goes this way, you might need to zag, because like that's what becomes most important for those big time conference schools. But that is, as it stands, a cool thing for Notre Dame. It's like, you get to look forward to playing Texas. You get to look forward to playing Alabama. If the USC thing goes away permanently, it would be a lot cooler. It would be really cool if like Notre Dame somehow was like, okay, Michigan's a lot closer. It's 3 hours away driving, not 5 flying or whatever it is to get out to LA. Somehow you could just get convinced like a school like that, and it's probably never going to happen because Michigan's a petty university. Let's call it like it is. But like, I just wish Notre Dame had something like that, something with some history. And in the recent history with Clemson is cool and all, but Notre Dame and USC have longstanding history. Notre Dame and Michigan go back a while. Michigan State, like you're not getting that anymore with the future of Notre Dame rivalries. So you get these cool games if they happen, but I do think there is an element of some stuff that's missing.
Yeah, absolutely. If the USC rivalry goes away, you're not going to have that historic element. I do think you have a really fun budding rivalry between Notre Dame and Clemson. And now with this USC news, I think it's abundantly clear. And Tyler, you referenced some of the reasons that the Clemson series, the 12-year scheduling agreement, it was not only a good thing for Notre Dame, it was an absolute necessity. You had to have an annual game against a powerhouse college football team. I know Clemson's not a historic blue blood the same way USC is, but it has been significantly more successful over the past 15 years or so. So you have that game every single year that at least gives you one marquee game on the schedule, which is great. You obviously need more, but that's great. And again, Tyler, like you mentioned, Florida, Michigan, Alabama, Texas on the future schedule. You pointed out correctly last week that Texas scheduled that game post realignment, so that's an interesting dynamic. But pre-SEC going to a 9-game conference schedule, which is what everyone widely believes is going to happen in the near future. So who knows how many of those games actually get played? The ACC is clearly not going to match the Big Ten and the SEC in depth anytime soon. So the Syracuses and NC States and Boston Colleges of the world, those are not going to move the needle schedule-wise. So for Notre Dame, quite frankly, you're looking at in the not too distant future needing to go 11-1 or 10-0 to make the playoff every year, with either a win over Clemson or beating everyone who's not Clemson, and at least playing Clemson close. So that it's a tough situation to be in, but through frankly no fault of Notre Dame's own, this is realignment that stems from the greed of other schools. You're in a tough spot scheduling wise, and I don't know if there's an easy way to get out of it.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, didn't I think Ross Dellinger's been the one that's been all over the Clemson, the ACC stuff. Is it still possible that Notre Dame starts regularly playing like within the 5 ACC games, like Miami and Florida State pretty much every time, or has that been dropped off?
They're supposed to play them more often. I don't know what the specifics are, or if anyone knows at this point. But they are supposed to play Miami and Florida State more often. And obviously there are years where like one of those teams is going to implode, like Florida State last year, and that's not going to be Notre Dame's fault. But the more you can play those two teams, the better as well.
Yeah, the crazy thing with college football is, on the one hand, if you're a fan and you want to go to these games, or you just want to be excited about a Notre Dame football season, you would much rather have Florida State, even with what happened last year, on the docket as opposed to like Boston College or Wake Forest or somebody like that. But the tricky part is, in a really good year, like when Clemson's really rolling and Miami's really rolling and Florida State's really rolling, holy cow, would that be a hard schedule for Notre Dame if you got to play all of them. But like, again, you're not in a conference and you've got your navies and stuff to kind of make up for that, I suppose.
That would still be a pretty standard schedule when it comes to the Big Ten and the SEC right now.
To that point, if I'm Michigan or Michigan State or some SEC team, why, and Notre Dame's rolling, why would I want to schedule Notre Dame?
Exact 100%.
Besides like the national draw and money, money is the answer to most things in college football. It's like, bro, why would you want to play Notre Dame, especially if they're rolling? Speaking of rolling, there's going to be some summer enrollees from Notre Dame's 25 class rolling into town. Those guys being Will Black, the 5-star offensive tackle, Chris Burgess, pass rusher, corner, Dallas Golden, tight end, James Flanagan, corner, Mark Zachary. List goes on, but those are the top names. Who do you guys think are like, man, this one player might be an instant impact? Because if you think about recent years, Notre Dame always has one summer enrollee that just booms. Leonard Moore, Ben Morrison, Joe Alt, to name a few. Who is it going to be this year, or no one? Tyler?
Well, so tough to predict these, right? Because I don't know if anyone predicted those guys, the corners. So, like, maybe it is a corner again, but I do feel like the depth is sort of maybe blocking that from happening, because it usually takes an injury, let's call it like it is, for one of those corners to come into the fold like super quickly. I suppose it didn't for Benjamin Morrison and even Jaden Mickey a couple of years ago. Those guys were playing as true freshmen right away. But like, I'm looking at this, is Dallas Golden or Mark Zachary going to play right away as true freshman corners? Not if Leonard Moore and Christian Gray stay healthy. And then I think you got some really good options behind them with Carson Hobbs, Cree Thomas. Like, the cornerback depth is through the roof. So I'm not looking at those guys right now. I'm probably you can send this off to Old Takes Exposed at some point, because like you said, Mike, like, these corners just play right away. It's what they do at Notre Dame. Credit to Mike Mickens, honestly, on that. But I'm really thinking James Flanagan is a guy that we're going to have our eyes on, because on the flip side of the cornerback depth chart looking amazing right now going into the summer, tight end, man, I think you've mentioned it before, Jack. You're an Eli Raridan injury away from, I don't want to say complete catastrophe, but an Eli Raridan injury away from being that like SpongeBob gif where everything in his mind is on fire and he's running around and there's a bunch of SpongeBobs that don't know what the heck to do. That could be Notre Dame at the tight end position. James Flanagan could really solidify that, because when you look at the tight ends, you have Raridan, of course. Ty Washington coming in, I honestly have no idea what to expect from him from Arkansas. Cooper Flanagan is obviously injured with the Achilles. Jack Larson, he's been around a little bit now. You're not sure what his ceiling is, to be completely honest with you. James Flanagan is a guy that, like, you can hope and dream that his ceiling is that of a Mitch Evans who just left, or maybe a Michael Mayer. I mean, I know you're talking about the best tight end in Notre Dame history statistically at that point, but this guy, Notre Dame legacy, big time tight end where he comes from out of high school, like, he might be the guy that you're looking at and you're saying, yeah, he wasn't here in the spring, but he's here now and he's going to be here in the fall, and you're pouring a lot into him. Everyone wanted my answer there to be Will Black, but I think just like with the corners, you have a situation at offensive line where it's like, who is he going to play? Who has to get hurt? What guys have to get hurt for Will Black to get on the field? That's kind of what it might be for him right away.
Yeah, you took most of my talking points there. Flanagan is certainly the name that comes to mind for me, just because of the situation. Like, I think he's going to have every chance to get that tight end 2 role. I think that also calls calls to attention one of my not necessarily not unpopular, but something people aren't talking about enough, and that, like, the Cooper Flanagan injury is a bigger deal than I think most realize, because while he wasn't like a prolific passing option, he was going to block well, and he was reliable when you threw him the ball. So that's something that Notre Dame is going to have to see someone step up. And James Flanagan, everything we hear, everything Mike and Kyle have written about him, and Charles Power with On 3 Nationals says, like, athletic freak for his size and potential stud. So he'll have a chance right away. Black should probably have a chance to make the 2 deep. I wouldn't put it past him there, but as far as starting, yes, it's obviously got to take an injury. Even Joe Alt took multiple injuries. I think I wasn't on the beat at the time, but certainly at least one to Blake Fisher, and I think 1 or 2 others for him to get his shot to start. A name that's not getting talked about enough, just because of the mold that helped on special teams last year. I'm looking at Adam Hulak, the edge rusher from Elmhurst, Illinois. He's listed as 6'4", 240 pounds on 3. Everything Mike and Kyle have written about him says he's kind of got a nasty edge to him. That's the kind of Viper type that Marty Biaggi has loved on like kickoff and punt block last year with Logan Thomas and Bryce Young. So I would not put it past him to make a big special teams impact this year.
Speaking of special teams, am I totally crazy in saying like, let's see what this Eric Schmidt kid can do? Because maybe I am totally crazy, because if we go back last year, Mitch Jeter wasn't looking too great in was that the fall or even the spring? Maybe both.
It was the spring. Yeah, I think he was fine in the fall.
Okay. This kid's supposed to be really good, right? Like, because I wasn't all too impressed with Noah Burnett, and I don't think Noah Burnett's coming in with the same accolades that Mitch Jeter did. So you never know at the kicking spot. So I mean, I'm gonna have my eye on him. I think we're gonna want to see what he can do. Good note on the defensive lineman though, because I forget that like Notre Dame's getting 3 defensive linemen just like that in the summer enrollees, and one of those is Christopher Burgess, who is like the big time signee out of that class, right? So that's really exciting too.
Yeah, Chris Burgess is a good shot if you want that like under the radar guy. What about Brandon Logan from Fort Wayne, Indiana Snyder as a safety / special teamer to just come out of nowhere? A name to know. Players who need more buzz, Jack. Who's just not getting enough discussion?
When I suggested this, I was thinking more from a national perspective, because I don't think there's really anyone who's not getting enough buzz on our website, because we talk about everyone at great length. But I think Adon Schuler needs more national buzz, and he was the main guy I was thinking of. Like I am really not sure why he's not getting shout outs on these top 10 positional lists, top 100, 150 players lists. Like there's just really nothing on him. And I don't get it, because he was, I get that he's not like a freak size wise. Like he'll, when it comes draft time for him, either this year or next year, he'll deal with the same criticisms that Xavier Watts got, which is that he's not the biggest guy. That he's not the biggest guy for the position. I think he's listed at 5'11" or so. And I think he's probably got better raw speed than Watts, but he doesn't have like elite speed. So I get why people aren't talking about him that much. But man, the way he played football last year, he was he was a huge part of why Notre Dame made the national championship game. And he's like the one guy on that list. Obviously, Moore and Love are getting a ton of national love. You see references to Greathouse, to Malachi Fields, to the offensive line, to Drake Bowen. You see a ton of buzz out there. Not a lot of Schuler buzz, and that's something that I'm just not really getting right now.
The irony in that is you bring up Watts, and for some of the same reason, he's not going to get like Xavier Watts got a lot of NFL love eventually because he had to. He had 13 interceptions over the last 2 seasons. Nobody else had more like that. You're going to talk about that guy, but you talked about the body size, right? And just like they're not Kyle Hamilton, right? They're not 6'4" freaks, unicorn. Kyle Hamilton was a unicorn at the safety spot. So I do agree with you in that Adon Schuler is kind of like more like Watts in that sense, where nobody's ranting and raving about the measurables and all of those things. But the flip side of that is nobody's talking about Adon Schuler because Xavier Watts took up so much headspace and conversation space last year because, like I said, nobody was doing what Watts was doing in terms of production at the safety spot. And eventually you had to talk about that. Like we preview the heck out of these opponents every single week, right, Jack? And you're even doing it right now for the magazine that I mentioned earlier in this show. So we know what these opponents' perspectives are coming in. And like, I'm the guy that watches the coaches' press conferences and whatnot every week going into games. And it was always Xavier Watts. Like we're going to know where that guy is at all times. And it's still, he still got him, right? I think Adon Schuler could end up being the guy that people talk about when you're talking about the Notre Dame secondary. And it's another ironic thing is I was point blank asked for Hey Horka last week, like, hey, who is going to be the X factor? And Xavier Watts was more than that, because the X factor is a guy that either is or isn't going to give you something, and that's going to change the course of that game, right? Xavier Watts always gave you something, but I think he transcended X factorism, if you will, because like he was so good at it that, yeah, he's an X factor, even though you know what he's going to give you. Don Schuler, I think, can be that. So I love the shout there for sure. Like you said, Jack, when we cover these guys in the offseason, we are giving so much publicity and buzz to all of them that nobody, in addition to a Don Schuler, really jumped out at me for the answer to this prompt. But I think you will like this one because Drake Bowen is kind of the leader. You're talking more about, and I'm going to go to the linebackers here. You're talking more about like losing Jack Kaiser and Drake Bowen coming up and stepping into that. Jalen Sneed, we're having that offseason conversation again because he looks different than he ever has, right? I think someone who's getting lost in the shuffle, and again, I preface this with, you're going to like this because I know that you really like this guy and you've mentioned him in our conversations a couple of times. Kingston Viliamu-Asa, we forget that he was just a true freshman last year, and he played it was only a 5 linebacker rotation for Max Bola because he was good enough to be one of those guys that you relied upon in his first season, right? Like that was significant to me. And I think he's going to be even better as a sophomore. Who knows how good he's going to be as a junior, maybe good enough to come out early and go to the NFL. Like I think he's that type of talent. And if he keeps tapping into that, dude, he might be like phenomenal this year, especially if, like you're saying, Jack, if you think Madden Faremo is not quite ready yet, and I know you've been on that a little bit, and this linebacker rotation has even dwindled a little bit, dude, I think KVA is going to have an even larger share, and he's going to do even more with it. So you hope he stays healthy because that injury at the end of last season sucked for him, and it sucked for everyone that wanted to see his continued development. But that's my guy that's like, hey, give this guy some buzz because I think he's going to be phenomenal.
Yeah, another guy that I mentioned him earlier on the show is Traore. And I think he's kind of a victim of timing in terms of the national buzz conversation. Like Jagusa missed most of the season, but he played in the Orange Bowl, so he got the national attention. And he's appearing on some of these preseason lists. Traore played early in the season. I think he was just as phenomenal and flashed just as much. Because he played because his best game was against Miami, Ohio, and not Penn State, he's not getting that kind of attention.
A name that longtime Notre Dame hoops fans know is Pat Garrity, returning to South Bend. Jack, tell us about this.
Yeah, so Notre Dame is actually doing something pretty unique. Hiring a college basketball general manager is increasingly common right now, but according to CBS, Notre Dame is the first school to hire a basketball general manager who oversees both men's and women's basketball. And I don't really have a concrete opinion about that decision. We'll get to Garrity himself in a sec. But it is interesting because on one hand, you're overseeing a combined personnel roster of about like 25 to 30 people, as opposed to 85 with football. But men's and women's basketball have very different needs and goals and standards at a given point in time. So I'm very curious to see how this works out.
Yeah. I mean, I was reading that CBS story this morning with like a puzzled look on my face because I was like, how are you going to do that? And the numbers thing, I think makes it a little easier. Like you said, Jack, like I picture Mike Martin walking into his job a few months ago. Holy cow, was that overwhelming because you don't know any of these kids. You don't know any of these coaches, really. You had a few relationships there, but like that's overwhelming. Pat Garrity's only got to get to know, like you said, Jack, 25 to 30 kids on those rosters any given year. Right now, it's a little less than that. We talked about that a lot on this show with the women's basketball situation. But maybe he's a guy who can help with that because I think where we have to turn this conversation to next is this guy's a Notre Dame guy through and through. Mike set us up, put it on the tee with us there. I mean, just going back and looking at his statistics and what he did at Notre Dame in the mid to late 90s. Geez, man, the guy's averaging over 23 points, was the Big East Player of the Year, consensus second team All-American. graduates with very high honors, cum laude from Notre Dame, I believe, was pre-med, I think. Obviously didn't end up going into the medical field because he had a 10-year NBA career to get to and played in over 500 NBA games. So one, very smart guy. Two, basketball was his life for decades, if you include high school and college and his pro career. And so I think he knows what he's doing. He has an MBA from Duke. Again, I just want to keep hammering home the part that he's very smart. And as we've seen, if you have a Duke and Notre Dame background, you can be pretty successful in South Bend. Riley Leonard just showed us that. But I think, Jack, Pat Garrity is here to stay for more than 1 year. Riley Leonard was limited to that. Pat Garrity, this sounds like a job that who knows what it is in 2 years. I think, Chad Bowden is sort of a no-no to bring up around here these days, but in his USC introductory press conference as the general manager there, I think he hit the nail on the head when he says, like, I don't know what this job is. I don't know where it's going, but just get in the door if you're Pat Garrity, help these basketball teams out. You were here for your playing days, and I think he can make this a pretty good, like, it's a culture hire, and we'll see what he does with it.
Yeah, I think you touched on a lot of Garrity's background. The important point to mention is that he does have some executive experience in personnel with the Detroit Pistons, as I believe the assistant general manager from 2016 to 2020. And the other thing that I want to mention is that, like, one of my main takeaways from the offseason on both the men's and women's basketball side is that they really need a general manager. Both programs do, because I think Micah Shrewsbury and Niele Ivey, obviously they both have different strengths. One of those strengths for both of them, I think, is high school recruiting. Like, they've both proven to be very good at that. But I think we've seen cracks in the roster building foundation show for both, certainly on the men's side with all the losses, but then on the women's side with the way it fell apart at the end of the season and the offseason turmoil. So I think adding a general manager who can take a bird's eye view of the whole operation and accurately determine team needs and which players Notre Dame needs to bring in and roster building over the course of multiple seasons. I think it was a necessary hire for both programs. And obviously we don't know enough about Pat Garrity to know how it will work out right now. And but I think it certainly, from everything we've seen, seems like a good hire.
Yeah, even if you have just one extra mind in the room, I'm speaking from the woman's side here, who's been on basketball rosters, and like you said, Jack, for a good 5 years there, has managed basketball rosters in a way. I know that was at the pro level, but like, it's easy to let things slip through the cracks if you're Niele Ivey and her assistants, who are so focused on these few things, which is like high school recruiting and making sure the on-court product is good. Pat Garrity is a guy that's going to come in and be like, and our message board subscribers are going to love this. He's going to say, hey, why do we only have one signee in the class of 2025? Like, what can we do to make that better in 2026 and 2027? So I think this is a great hire. But to tie it all together, it is going to be interesting, like you said at the beginning, Jack, to see how he balances both programs, because that is a lot.
We didn't mention his son, Henry, is on the Notre Dame football team. Like, this is a Notre Dame guy through and through. Who knows what that role looks like for him, but just to have him involved and, like, I mean, Google me, bro. Like, I'm Pat Garrity. Like, look what I did in college and in the pros. I think it's a great hire for Notre Dame. Who knows what it's going to look like, but I'm excited about it for both programs. Folks, please hit the thumbs up on this video. Subscribe to the Blue and Gold YouTube channel if you have not done so yet. This is the Notre Dame Six Pack. We do this every single Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, unless one of us has to cancel. But usually Tuesday, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be live tomorrow night, Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, myself and Tim Hyde talking some Notre Dame football and recruiting. So don't miss that. For Jack Soble and Tyler Horka, I'm Mike Singer. Hit that thumbs up. As always, we'll catch you next time.